Hey, it's Christian with Instant Nonprofit, and I wanted to just take a few minutes today and talk about the roles of officers, directors, and staff and how these interplay. Now, if you started a nonprofit on your own, chances are you're just getting going. You only have a few people who can get involved, and you're wondering, how can I make the use of the few people that I have able to serve me in this nonprofit, able to help to satisfy the roles of the required officers and directors, and maybe even get a few things done around the nonprofit for you on the day-to-day basis. Well, the way I explain it to people is that it's like you have three hats on a dresser, and you've got your officer hat, your director hat, and your staff hat. Now, of course, you'd never wear two hats at once or three because you'd kind of look silly. So each one of these hats is to be worn at a different time, appropriate to the role that you're playing at the time. So, for example, you may have someone, even yourself, right, as the founder of a nonprofit. You may serve as director, you may serve as an officer as well, and you may serve as staff. You probably do a lot of the day-to-day things, and at the point that the nonprofit can afford to pay you, you may even want to transition to a full-time paid staff position. Well, that's okay. People often get it wrong and mistake the idea that you cannot be paid by a nonprofit, even if it's one you start, while being a director, and that is not true. The role of directors and officers are usually not paid. Those are volunteer positions. Staff positions, of course, are paid. But the roles of officer and director are they have very low commitment levels as far as time. So just to go back to the three hats analogy, if you are a director, and you may have an officer position as well, and you may be staff. When you're being a director, you're simply attending as a member of the board of directors. You are attending board meetings. You are reviewing the board, the activities at a high level, and you're reviewing the budget at a high level and making voting decisions on what the organization is going to do. That is the role of the director. So you put that hat on for your board meetings and for making those decisions as a board on the board of directors and voting, signing resolutions or voting for resolutions. When you take that hat off, you may serve as an officer. For example, you may be the treasurer, and the treasurer's job is to just read the treasurer's report into the record. Now, that might happen during a board meeting, but what you're actually doing is you're taking a momentary leave of your director position, if you were to do that, and you would act as the officer in reading that report out to the board. And then finally, you have the staff position. You may, as a treasurer who happens to be a director, also serve in a staff capacity where you're a volunteer or you're paid to do the books because that you have an expertise in that area. And that's an example of how someone could serve all three of these positions and not really run into any conflict of interest. Now, of course, you do need to comport and comply with your conflict of interest policy, but you can, in fact, serve all three of those positions just in distinct times and in distinct ways. So I hope that clears up the question about officers, directors, and staff. Now, each nonprofit is required to have a minimum of 3 directors and also has 3 officers, and usually those roles are occupied by all 3 directors. The officer roles are president, treasurer, and secretary. However, you may want to combine treasurer and secretary. We recommend keeping president as a distinct role, but you may want to combine treasurer and secretary so that you can have one director yourself, perhaps as the founder, being president and a director, and your right-hand person perhaps being treasurer and secretary and a director. And then in that case, the third person would just be a director and not occupy a director role. Or you can have a treasurer and a secretary role occupied by one of each of those two people. So hopefully that clears up questions about this. Please put your comments below and let us know if you have any further questions. We will be doing these little chats and covering some of these issues that come up with us on customer calls so that you can enter into this process of running a nonprofit on your own confidently and without having to do a lot of research, because there is so much incorrect information out there on Google. All right, so have a wonderful day, and here's to your mission. Take care.